friends, again, it's a pleasure to greet you on this program. I do appreciate people out there by the dozen that tell me that they enjoy this show. And one reason I know they're watching, I can't go to the store or anywhere. I enjoy it, of course. But what someone will hail me and call me by my name, and I don't know them from Adam. But finally it comes out that they're watchers of this program. I meet that every time I go to the store. I can honestly say about every time I go. Friends will hail me on the street. They say friends, yes. Friends are just strangers you don't know yet, and I get acquainted with a lot of interesting people that way, so I'm real happy to talk to you. And some of them want to come and see me. Well, that's fine too. I've been away from Pleasant Hill a good while this spring, but I'm back now, and I'm back temporarily right at the moment, but I'll be back here permanently real soon. And I'd be glad to have you come by and see me. One man came by the other day when I was here and said his 90-year-old mother wanted to tour the house. Well, there's steps all around it and a slope in the back, but he said she's very capable, so we'll be glad to have you visit. So thank you for your comments on the program. Last time we together, I used the theme Goldenhearted Bristolians. And I take that from a chapter in my book called Pioneers in Paradise. And I told you in that program during that time that one of the principal reasons, I think it is the main reason, I think that's what threw the switch, so to borrow railroad lingo, that really put me on the track of staying here, would be the kindness, goodness, compassion, helpfulness of the people of Bristol. We're continuing that theme in this program today. If you have to read it in my book, in Pioneers in Paradise, it's called Ain't Hully the Totem Woman. After the Civil War, now last week's story centered during the Civil War, where a man found a husband for a poor widow who was having a time of living, gave her permanent relief. After the war, Civil War ended, a lot of ex-slaves, of course, were turned loose. There were a great number of them living in Bristol at the time, and a greater number on farms around Bristol. Well, they had no way to make a living. They were scattered. Some just left the country and walking along the railroad or a road hoping to find somewhere to settle down, somewhere to find food and a place they could live. It was a pitiful situation, really. Some stayed in the homes here as hired servants from then on. Others wanted to stay in Bristol so bad, or the area so bad, that they bore a lot of hardship trying to find a way to make a living here. I've told of several ex-slaves who did find a way to make a living. One was old Caesar Souchong. Had been a servant in the Souchong family, the old pioneer Souchong family. He was a fiddler, and he came into Bristol and made his living by playing music for people downtown. They'd throw in a nickel or a dime, or rarely a quarter, and tell him to play him a tune or two, and he would play music on the streets. He fiddled one man right out of the Baptist Church over here, but they didn't believe in dancing at that time, and the man gave him a quarter and told him to play his favorite tune, and he did. And the man got so thrilled with it, he danced right down there in town and did circles around Caesar. And of course he was thrown out of his church, but he was the richest man in town, so he went down the 800 block and built his own church. They called it Bursons Baptist Church for a long time. There was others that came here and made a way of living. I think of a man who would haul water into town from a spring and sell to people, an old ex-slave that did that. There's others that would be gardeners and yard people. Mr. Wood at my own old home here in Bristol had 2 ex-slaves working in his home. One was old Aunt Sadie Jefferson, who spent 22 years in the Pleasant Hill and never was outside the yard during 22 years. Her son, she was the housemaid, the nursemaid, and the cook and everything in the house. Helped raise the Wood children. They dearly loved her. And then there was her son, Peter Jefferson, who was the yard man, the garden maker, and the carriage keeper who drove with Captain Wood as a carriage keeper. But one that I featured in my book that I want to tell you about today was old Aunt Huldy Seneca. She had belonged for years to the Seneca family. Senecas were all connected to the Souchong, so she was in the same family really that Caesar Souchong hailed from. So Aunt Huldy and her man Henry, and he was much older than she was about 20 years younger than her husband. They moved into town here, and Henry could work at the time, but finally got to where he couldn't, finally died, left Huldy alone. Everybody called her Hully, but her name was Hulda. Well, she accidentally found a way to make a living. A man named Valentine Keebler had a big store here, and she went over to his store. She wasn't begging for food, she just asked him if there wasn't some work she could do to get a little food. She'd been left alone as a widow in a little hut just right near downtown. It was in the backyard actually of a store. And she had a little hut there to live in. It wasn't much, it was just barely habitable, but she stayed there. Well, Mr. Keebler said, I know you're going up the street a way toward your home, and I have a little something here in the store I want to send up that way to a man that was by the other day and said when I got one, I don't know what the article was, but said when I got one to send it up, and you're going up that way and maybe you could carry it for me. If so, I'll give you maybe a apple or something out of the store that you could eat. And away she went with whatever he had to send up the street. Well, at night, lying upon her bed in her humble little home, the thought came to her, why don't I offer delivery services to the people who have the stores downtown? The next day, she went over to Yates Seneca, who was of the family to whom she had belonged as a slave. He had a big store on the corner of Moore and State Street, where the Java Jays just recently vacated. She went over there. And yes, Mr. Seneca knew her, and he said, I do have something that you can take up to Solar Hill. Some people ordered this, and I need to send it up there. Some article of grocery material, I don't know what, food. Well, she delivered it for him, and he gave her either a nickel or a dime or maybe something out of the store. And then she went to W.W. James, Uncle Will James, who had a big store on the corner of what's now Martin Luther King Boulevard and State Street. Will James was a very kind, compassionate old man. And yes, he had something she could deliver. And she did walk maybe a half a mile to deliver his goods. And he gave her a little food or a little money for it, I don't know which. But she was in business. And for years and years, she would go from door to door downtown saying, do you have something I can tote today? She called it toting something instead of carrying something. And ere long, true to Bristol nature, they're real good at nicknaming people. They called her the toting woman. And she bore that name as long as she lived. Hully the toting woman. Well, every day she was a major sight on the street going from the store to store. She called Valentine Keebler Mr. Val. She might holler at his door, "Mr. Val, have you got anything to deliver I can deliver for you today?" Or Lige Seneca, Yates Seneca, she'd go to his store and say, "Mr. Lige, have you got anything I can tote? I can walk a fur piece today. I feel pretty good." He might have something for her. On up to the James store, she'd say, "Uncle Will, have you got something that old Huldah can tote today? I feel pretty good. I can tote a fur piece today," and he would do that. Well, I don't know how many years Miss Huldah, the toting woman, was able to work, but the time came one day when she didn't show up at any store, and somebody was sent to see about her. They found her lying in bed, sick. She said, "I just don't feel like toting any today, but maybe I'll feel better tomorrow." Well, the truth was she never got able to tote again. She just had to give it up. Then when the Goldenhearted Bristolian set in, the old hut that she lived in wasn't worthy of habitation. Roof leak, cracks big enough to let the winter wind through, and the floors were actually rotting and falling in. So Mr. James had a little house at the end of the famous James Road. He called it the leftover house. He built it out of leftovers from the other houses he'd built, just a little tiny house. He let her have it for the rest of her time with no charge. Then the women of Solar Hill and women all over town made a little pact together, and they decided that they'd take it day about coming to nurse her. There was the old sweet Margaret Caldwell, lived in the great house that's now the Weaver Funeral Home. She would walk from there over to town to help her keep her day of caring for Aunt Huldah. And she'd always bring a basket of food for her. And when wintertime came, Aunt Margaret Caldwell was a great maker of quilts. She always loved to make quilts. She brought new quilts for the bed. And another lady, neighbors of hers, Ms. Curtin, lived in the house where now there's a contracting firm. She brought blankets for the old lady and also food in a basket. From all over town, the good women would bring their food, bring their time, spend the day. Finally, it got to where somebody had to stay with her at night. Those ladies chipped in and hired a nurse named Mrs. Eccles to take care of her at night. Then the time came, of course, when she passed away. Well, there was no money for the burial, but there lived a good-hearted undertaker here, Mr. A.H. Bickley, who was the second undertaker in town. He is the one that always put on such a grand display when he had a funeral. You can read about him in my book, Pioneers in Paradise, or in my book, #1, telling the story of Bristol. He buried a lot of people free, and some he buried so cheap is almost free. He donated a casket for one of the best he had, a walnut one, and also the services of the funeral home, services of the carriage, and they took her to what's now, well, it was then known as the Flat Hollow Cemetery. It's been moved since and is known as the Citizen Cemetery. It's right at the end of Piedmont Avenue. And he buried her without charge. Well, that was typical of the good-hearted Bristolians of the days of yore. But it's also true of the good-hearted Bristolians today. Times haven't changed much. The needy here yet have friends that will help take care of. Of course, we have welfare agencies now, and that's changed a little bit. But there's still people, and certainly I met them when I first came here, and I meet them about every day now. Those golden, kind-hearted Bristolians. And more and more I grow thankful that I chose this town for my home. And as Thomas Jefferson said about his home, I hope to live here the rest of my days, and I hope to die here. Well, when that time comes, I have that same wish that it can be right in the old home that I love so well. Folks, it's been good to be with you today, and as usual, I'll give you my benediction, more or less my trademark, and I mean it. I don't just say it to be saying something. I mean every word of it. May the best in life be yours.